Namaskar and welcome to this exciting episode of Sattology, Debunking Mythology. Sattology means science of truth, or study of truth. Opposite of that is mythology, which is science or study of fake, lie, or imagination. I can't emphasize enough. Don't use the word mythology in any public forum wherever, for history is connected to Ramayana and Mahabharata. Sometimes you may not get Puranic references, but if you look at the Puranic references also, the geography of Earth, whenever it is mentioned, is accurately mentioned. So they cannot be mythology because it captures the actual. No ancient literature of the world other. Actually, there was nothing before. In most of the literature is manufactured in the 17th century by the Europeans. Before there was nothing. So the only literature in the world which was recorded was Sanskrit-based literatures written in India. So let us welcome my very good friend and guest, Sri Vedveer Arya.
Namaste, Aditya ji.
Namaskar, namaskar. So I was, the mind plays a very important role in building the uniqueness of or identity of a nation. We have seen that not a single American. One thing I really like about this is my home about Americans is that they will do anything but not copy an enemy's technology. Like this is one thing they will do. They've given, but they will not copy. There is some self-respect over there. And that is the foundation of innovation. Even if their thing is faulty, Bhagavad Gita says it, that you should focus on your Swadharma, even if you can do some other Swadharma better, but still focus on yours. Even if you make mistake, still follow yours, mentioned in Bhagavad Gita. So, what do you have to say on that? And then we'll begin your presentation.
This I just take back to our Devasura Sangram during the Rigvedic era. The Devas, in a way, if you see, the Asuras were little bit ahead in the technology during those times. Same Asuras migrated towards westward. That's why they are leading the technology in modern days. But but still, Devas ensured that they will fight with their own willpower as well as their political power. Finally, they was defeated the Asuras. The same thing that continues. A strong nation has to have its own systems in place. You can't simply import the systems and you can become a strong nation. It is impossible. The only one line I can say that you can't be a wrestler with imported muscles. You have to have your own muscles to be a wrestler in the to counter other wrestlers. So that is the bottom line where your strength, even in the defense and others, your military strength should come from the internal sources. It's not just you can't have be a military power just by imported equipment. Yes, Aditya.
No, thank you very much because it has to be internal. Bhagavad Gita says very clearly. So, if it mentions about Swadharma, then it is also mentioned about other things also. And that should be the root. I'll tell you one thing about me. I have never copied any other's idea, including in business. I have run my companies in my own way and not any copying anything, no best practices, nothing. Because I believe if you can do anything successfully, profitably, that is the best practice itself.
No, you can learn from each another, each other. There is a way to how to because the knowledge is always sacred. So you have to exchange the knowledge and others. But the how you are applying it, that has to be your own. The application of the knowledge is the key to the success.
No,
You
you
can't
can learn,
simply copy the some other applications and then say that you are leading the world. That is impossible.
including the word Sattology is created by me. So the so some people thought that
Maybe
Sattology
the
means
first Indian to contribute a word to the Oxford Dictionary of English. Huh?
probably I don't know, but maybe if they accept it, it will be accepted only if people use it more and more. Otherwise, it won't be accepted. It has to be a mass movement in India, then it is going to be accepted. So let's begin the presentation and the Indo-Greeks
Yes.
and Greek mythology is known everywhere. But Hindu mythology is not actually mythology. It is a fact. So go ahead, please.
Today, yes, Aditya, today I'm taking up the topic related to the dating of Indo-Greek kings, and in the especially our western borders like Afghanistan and Pakistan, they have used two very distinct eras, that is Yavana era and the Ages era. So fixing of the epochs of those eras as well as the dating of Indo-Greek kings is very, very important because there are numerous references in Indian literature regarding Indian Indo-Greek, though there is no reference of Alexander, by
That's
the
right.
way. But the problem is in the chronology, the modern historians use these things as to reject the traditional chronology.
That's
So
right.
now I am going to validate why traditional chronology is perfect when you work out the chronological inconsistencies in the modern framework, how they have placed the Indo-Greek.
Yeah.
So I'll just start my presentation on to understand how these issues are very, very important. So I'm going to touch upon the era of Indo-Greek kings and naturally the Kushanas, because Kushanas are the, I can say that they are the successors of the Indo-Greeks. And in some other way, we have even referred to Kushanas as Yavanas sometimes in our day, because they were actually using the script evolved from the Ionian script. That is called Bactrian script, the Kushanas have used. Then I'm going to touch upon the epoch of the Yavana era and Ages era. So before going to the Indo-Greek kings, we need to understand how the modern historians have arrived the dating of the Sandrocotus, because the Sandrocotus and Alexander's contemporaneity is the sheet anchor for the modern chronologists. So, but this is the reference in what actually Justin mentioned with reference to the one Roman historians. Based on this, modern historians say that 323, 323 BC, Chandragupta was almost, was not yet became the king of Magadha. Then 316 BC, he has not yet defeated the Greeks. 303 is the BC, the date in which Chandragupta actually defeated the Greeks, and he was in conflict with the Seleucus. So the Chandragupta and Seleucus had a treaty around 303. So that's why you can only the chronology, when you define the exact absolute date of the Chandragupta or the so-called Sandrocoptus, you can only date somewhere 311, means 311 BC to 303 BC. This is the inconsistency, but modern historians have just selected the 322, 323 because the day Alexander died, almost the same year Chandragupta became the king of Magadha. And later they say that 311 and 12, he became the king of Ujjain. That is another speculation and totally a baseless assumption. But this is how they manage both the dates. First date, they'll take it Chandragupta's coronation in Magadha, 323 around. Then they take 312, 311 around, where the Chandragupta became, he has a second coronation in Ujjain. This is how they arrive the modern chronologies. This is everything is based on an assumption that Alexander lived around 320, actually died around 323, means his lifetime can be the way Western historians fix the lifetime of the Alexander around 350, 362, 323. Now, the Sandrocotus' son reference is there, the Greek historian, and even Strabo refers to that. And actually, the so-called Alithrocates or Amitocates or Amitraghata, the way the Sanskritized word they refer it to. And he actually interacted with the Antiochus king, because the reference is that Indian king was in correspondence with the king Antiochus, asking to be sent sweet wine and dried figs and a sophist, a philosopher also. So now there is we need to reconcile the chronology of this thing, because Antiochus is in the line of the Seleucus, the Syrian king during that time. And then the Indian chronology, Chandragupta Maurya, Bindusara, and then gap of some 4 years, and Ashoka, the way the modern historians fix the chronology of the entire Mauryan dynasty. Now, the Ashoka. There is no reference of Ashoka at all in entire Greek and Roman literature. This is very astonishing fact, because where the Ashoka was the greatest king of the Mauryan dynasty, but there is no reference of Ashoka at all. Then the Romila Thapar, the great, I can say, the modern, a symbol of the modern history of India. So what she says, Ashokan inscriptions and his coronation is the bedrock of ancient Indian chronology. This is the one basic fact where the modern historians always bank upon, saying that no one can deny this fact that Ashoka's coronation happened around 362 or 272, just 4 years problem. But this is the bedrock of ancient chronology. You can't shift. Why? It is nothing to do with the, anything to Indian chronology. This assumption of the bedrock date is based on the Alexander state and the later Indo-Greek king. So, and they refer it to the another rock edict 30. It mentions 4 or 5 Indo-Greek kings: Antiocha, Turamaya, Antikini, Maka, and Alikasundara. It is Alexander, the later Indo-Greek king of Alexander. So, but the modern historians, they identified Antiocha with the Antiochus Theos of Syria, then Turamaya with the Ptolemy Philadelphus of Egypt, then Antikini, Antigonus of Macedonia, then Maka, Magus, then Alikasundara, they think either one, either maybe the Alexander of Corinth or Alexander Epirus. So this is how the modern historian, just in the way the names are sounding, based on the a kind of a resemblance with the names, they have identified these things without any iota of evidence to establish that whether Ashoka is referring to these kings at all. So we need to investigate, because there is a reference of Indo-Greek kings in the Ashokan inscriptions. Then how we are going to date? Traditionally, Ashoka was there somewhere in the 18th century BCE, because as per the Puranic chronology and various other evidences established that traditional chronology starts Mahabharata around 32nd century BC. Thereafter, 1500 years is the Nandas. Then you have to place Mauryas only after 100 years later. So maximum you can date the Mauryan dynasty in the 15th or 16th century BC. You can't push forward the date of the Maurya in traditional chronology. Then there is a question on what basis you are going to date the Indo-Greek kings. This is the basic problem in Indian chronology. What the I have already discussed in many times in Sattology. What are the real problems in the Indian chronology? How Shaka, Shakanta, two different epochs have been mixed up by the colonial historians. That led to 661 years. And another problem was the Buddha and Mahavira became contemporaries due to certain misunderstandings or assuming the Chandragupta Maurya as the disciple of Bhadrabahu, whereas the Malava Gupta king Chandragupta was the disciple of Bhadrabahu, not Chandragupta Maurya. So these two errors led to 1380-year chronological error. That way, Buddha attained Nirvana around 1864 BCE, not 483 BCE, as being taught in the universities. And Kala Ashoka, there was an Ashoka after 100 years. The majority of Buddhist texts refer to the Ashoka became king in the 100th year after Buddha Nirvana. So, a Kala Ashoka and Ashoka was there after 100 years of Buddha Nirvana. Thereafter, another 218 after this second Buddhist council, he was a Maurya Ashoka. So that's why there were two different Ashokas. Then this is how the traditional chronology. So the modern historians, what they suggest the inconsistency in this traditional chronology is there is a problem. Like if you see the Ashokan Brahmi and old Khroshti has been used in the Ashokan inscription. So now the problem is then Kushana Brahmi and later Khroshti is there in the Kushana and Kushana inscription. This is perfect. Then the chronologically Ashoka and old Khroshti has to be placed before Kushana. Then now the problem is this is the Indo-Greek king. The Indo-Greek king, the Ashokan Brahmi and Kharoshti, because numerous coins of Indo-Greek kings have been found, as well as the Heliodorus, the pillar inscription in Vidisha, that clearly shows that the Indo-Greek kings existed in India, or actually they were ruling over the Bactria and the Gandhara region when Ashokan Brahmi was in practice in India. Then how you can, and modern historians date Alexander around 356 and 323 BC. Then how you are going to date the Indo-Greek kings? This is the serious problem. So, and you can see this is the epigraphic evidence. This is the Ashokan Brahmi, and this is the a coin of Agathocols and Indo-Greek kings, and he has used both the Ionian script as well as the Ashokan Brahmi, and this is the Heliodorus inscription. And as per the reconstructed chronology, as I have revised the chronology considering the Buddha Nirvana in 1864 BC with various other evidences, Agathocols was in almost 1492 BC, and Heliodorus has to be dated 1370 BC. Now the problem is, if you are dating Alexander around in the 4th century BC, then Puranic chronology is totally incorrect. No, both cannot be correct. Either one is invalid. This is the bottom line. You can't have the both. All historians, especially from the in India, who are researching based on the Puranas, they always presented the Puranic chronology, but they assumed the date of Alexander in the 4th century BC. This led to a massive conflict in the, or you can say, rejection of the facts, because both cannot be valid. This is the reason why all traditional historians who actually propose the Puranic chronology is correct, the modern historians have rejected based on only this fact. If you say that Alexander was in 4th century BC, then the Puranic chronology is totally incorrect. And the paleography clearly indicates that Sandracotus can never be Chandragupta, and other issues are there. So now what we need to do, we have to first validate the date of Alexander and others. So that what I have done based on my 3 postulates I have in many forums I have explained. First, the Shaka era and Shakanta era, these 2 epochs are totally different, but modern historians they just mixed up these 2 epochs and accepted only one epoch, 78 AD. That led to 661 years of a massive chronological error, not only in India, but in the world chronology. And Buddha, Mahavira were they were not contemporaries. Actually, Buddha lived at least 600, 700 years before Mahavira. So this is another chronological error that has been added in Indian chronology, but this has not much effect on the world chronology. But some like a Sri Lankan chronology, Burmese and the Tibetan chronology have been affected with this one. So we can say that it is only India specific or Indian, the country is very close to India, their chronology will be affected, but this problem will not affect the Western chronology. But the first one, that Shaka Shakanta, will certainly affect the Western chronology also. That is actually, this is the epoch of Christian era. We are all following this common era, or what we call first AD. and we just assume that Jesus was born on first AD. But the entire world chronology has been reconciled considering the first AD as the sheet anchor. But this particular epoch of Christian era has never been validated because entire West was faithful till even today. But when the history was or chronology, when the world chronology was reconstructed at that time, the so-called historians like Usher, Lightfoot, then Newton, and their followers, they just had faithful belief, blind belief in the first epoch, and they started correcting the entire world chronology, and they rejected all traditional chronologies of ancient civilizations. So there is a problem in the epoch of Jesus' birth because what my challenge is you have to arrive the chronology of the Western chronology up to Augustus without referring to the first date. You cannot assume it because after once you finalize the chronology up to Augustus, then you fix the Jesus birth. Don't fix the Jesus birth first and then correct the entire world chronology backwards. That is the very, very wrong methodology. Now, the what I'll do, since we are discussing the history of Indo-Greek kings, what is the historiography? What are the sources to study the history of Indo-Greek king? The coins, it is the numismatic study of the coins of Indo-Greek kings found in India, in Afghanistan, and in Pakistan. Actually, that was India only. From only the last 200, 200 years, Afghanistan and Pakistan separated from India. Then Greek Aramaic inscriptions of Ashoka. So some inscriptions are at least 6 inscriptions are there. So modern historians say that Ashoka is the author of these inscriptions. We will validate who is the actually the author of Greek and Aramaic inscriptions because these inscriptions have been identified as an Ashokan inscriptions. And Aramaic is the script evolved only during the period of Achaemenid era. So we will discuss this evolution of scripts to validate whether these Greek and Aramaic inscriptions are actually related to Ashoka or some Indo-Greek king. And then in Indian literature, like Yavana Jataka was written by one Indo-Greek king called Sphujidwaja, because later Indo-Greek kings adopted Sanskrit names. Even Vriddha Yavana Jataka was written by Meena Raja. Then the famous Buddhist text Mulinda Panhu, it refers to Menander, Indo-Greek king Menander, who lived 500 years after Buddha Nirvana. Then naturally, some inscriptions like Heliodorus inscription, there is a reference of Indo-Greek kings of Heliodorus who visited Vidisha during the time of Shunga dynasty. So the evidence is there. Then Yuga Purana, it is the Yuga Purana, a small text, probably appendix to a one text called the Vriddha Garga Jyotisha. And this Yuga Purana is giving the Indo-Greek invasion up to Magadha, how they invaded up to Saketa and Magadha, and this Purana is referring to one or two Indo-Greek kings' names also. So Yuga Purana is clearly giving Indo-Greek kings' invasion during the time of Shali Shuka, who was actually the last kings of Mauryan dynasty. So generally, there are some references by Indo-Greek historians or some Western, like Periplus refers to one or two. So very few references actually in the Greek by Greek historian. But yes, this is the historical facts. Indo-Greek kings actually ruled over in Afghanistan, Bactria and Gandhar. And they actually, sometimes they took over entire some northern Pakistan and Sakala was actually capital during the time of when Menander and that Milinda Pannu, 500, Menander was ruling over in Takshashila and that Sakal city. Now, because just I have referred to you regarding that Greek and Aramaic inscriptions of Ashoka, how the modern academia believes in the evolution of script, that the first Phoenician script, probably 1200 or 1200 BC before. Then from the Phoenician script, archaic Ionian script, and then Paleo-Hebrew were born around 900 BC or 1000 BC. Thereafter, Aramaic script evolved out of that, probably directly from Phoenician script or under the influence of the archaic Ionian script. And it is just during the time of Achaemenid Empire. Then from the archaic Ionian, we have the later Ionian or Greek script, we can say, and that was evolved around 500 BC. And Kharoshti and Brahmi came only around just 100 years before the Mauryan dynasty or something. I don't know what is the assumption, because in India we haven't found any inscription older than the Brahmi script, because Brahmi is the oldest and the Kharoshti, both are the oldest scripts found in India. And Ashokan inscriptions are there, since Ashoka cannot be dated around 323, 268 BCE. So you can take another 100 years. So somewhere in the 4th century BC, or maximum you can go another 100 years, 5th century BC only. These two inscriptions came into being. So generally they talk about that probably the Aramaic or the Phoenician script influenced the Brahmi and Kharoshti to evolve in. This is another a false theory being taught in linguistics, the modern linguistics. Then the Bactrian script, Kushanas used this script. And obviously this script evolved from the Ionian script in India. But the true chronology, when we correct the chronology, because Ashoka, as per my dating, has to be dated around 1765 to 1737 BCE. So Brahmi, Kharoshti, both scripts existed before 18th century BC. So when these two scripts evolved, it is difficult, because we were using the script traditionally from longer period. Thereafter, when we started writing the letters together, then the scripts, all Indian scripts evolved out of this Brahmi and Kharoshti. So very, I can say, in a very conservative, I can say that this was evolved prior to 2000 BC or maybe prior to 3000 BC, these two Brahmi and Kharoshti script. I am not discussing that so-called Indus script, because that is only limited to the area of the Pakistan and Gujarat area. Actually, that script was used by the Scythians. When Scythians were ruling over before Mahabharata era, they used this script. But that was not the script, that was not Indian script, because Indian languages like Sanskrit and others can only be written in phonetic scripts. And the Indus script was not a phonetic script. It is actually Scythians in the Gandhara, other region. They were not the Sanskrit or practice. They were probably speaking a language called Paishachi and others. And that language, for that language, they have evolved a script, which was a logosyllabic script. Sanskrit cannot be written in logosyllabic script. Probably the words used by the Scythians were more closer to the Sanskrit words only, because finally the Shakas are Scythians living in India. Since Vaidikira and even Vasishtha, who formed an army with an army that consisted of the Scythian warriors. So I'm not discussing that in the script, because that the script existed, actually used by Scythians, and that became extinct around Mahabharata era, maybe some 200, 300 years after Mahabharata era. Now, this is the script, the evolution of script in India. If we compare with the Western scripts, like Phoenician script evolved somewhere 3000 to 2800, as per my assessment, because I have reconstructed the Western chronology, because based on the various other sheet anchors instead of based on the Christian era. So the Greek history is also, there is a greater antiquity. So the chronology has to be corrected. So thereafter, the Ionians, archaic Ionian script evolved from the Phoenician script around maybe 2000 BC or 1800 or 1700 BC. Thereafter, around same time, Paleo-Hebrew evolved, because there is an inscription of King David has been found in the Jerusalem. And then the Aramaic script. As per my chronology, the Achaemenid Empire has to be dated somewhere 1200 BC to 1000 BCE. because there is a chronological error of 660 year in the Western chronology also. Therefore, the evolution of Aramaic cannot be dated prior to 1300 BC. Only maximum the Aramaic can be dated 1300 BC. So this is very, very important I am mentioning, because you have to understand Ashoka was living at least 400 years before the evolution of Aramaic script. And the Bactrian script evolved almost at the same time when Aramaic was used, was evolving in Syria and the other regions. And then later Ionian Greek script, just it is also at the same time of the Aramaic and Bactrian script. And in India, the later Bactrian script evolved. So first let us understand. This is the Rabatak inscription by Kanishka, and I have reconstructed just the alphabets, how the alphabets have been used in the Bactrian script. One thing we have to understand, this Bactrian script is nothing, it is, this script has been used by Kushanas, Kushana king. And this script, there are a few inscriptions as well as the many coins. We find this Bactrian script in Kushana coins and Kushana inscriptions. And this script evolved only in Bactria under the influence of the archaic Ionian script, because Indo-Greeks were ruling over there. Kushanas are the successors of the Indo-Greek kingdom. So they evolved this script to write their Bactrian script. The difference is especially this Shah. There is no such letter in the Greek script, but this is a special script, special character or a letter has been introduced in the Bactrian script to use Indian or Bactrian language. So now let us understand the connection between Bactrian script and the Ionian script. Bactrian script had only 22 letters, and the archaic Ionian script has been evolved from Phoenician script, and Phoenician script had 22 letters, but archaic Ionian script had 21 letter extra, where the Bactrian script had only 22 letters. So this indicates that there was some way connection between, direct connection between Phoenician and the Bactrian script, though it had an influence under the archaic Ionian script, only one letter difference. Then later Ionian and Greek script had the 24 letters, and Bactrian script had only 22 letters, and evolved from the archaic Ionian or maybe the Phoenician script. What is the difference between this Ionian script and the Bactrian? The Bactrian script used, if you see this symbol, for the omega. Omega is a letter in the archaic Ionian script, but Bactrian used a different letter. And for sigma, they used like C in English or modern, the Roman letters. So, and a special letter they have introduced for the Shah. And what the Bactrians did, they just excluded the theta letter. They have not used because that is not required for the Bactrian script. This is how the Bactrian script evolved from the archaic Ionian script. Then Brahmi Kharoshti, these two have nothing to do with the Phoenicians, nothing to do with the archaic Ionian, no influence from the Aramaic, because it is a pure phonetic script and evolved for the requirements of writing Sanskrit and the Prakrit languages. So it is totally fallacious to say that there was some influence of Phoenician and other scripts in evolution of Brahmi and Kharoshti scripts. And as per my dating, the Ashoka, the Kala Ashoka, who lived around 1737 BC in 18th century, so already Brahmi and Kharoshti was well evolved during that time. It means such a high standard script cannot be evolved overnight. At least few thousands of years of history. And moreover, you have to understand, if you are writing letters individually, because the way we write in English or in the modern, the Roman script, every letter, though we cursive writing, we write every word together. But in ancient times, Like in Brahmi, every letter is separate, even though even with Matra also, every letter we write separately. So what happens when you write a script, every letter separately, then the longevity of that particular script would be more. Why? Because there would be very little corruption. When you start writing few letters together, then slowly, very fast, the evolution of the script would be very fast. The same thing happened after the Kushana period. We started writing the word a few letters together. That led to evolution of so many scripts in India from the Brahmi and Kharoshthi. But prior to the Shatavahana and up to the Kushana era, we used to write every letter separately. That this was the reason why Brahmi and Kharoshthi script remained the same, even though many hundreds and thousands of years have been elapsed. And we named it Brahmi. It is not somebody as well, the Brahmi. Since Brahma, during that time we started, during the Rigvedic era onwards. It is difficult to say right now whether the script during the Vedic era, because without a script Sanskrit language, the evolution of Sanskrit language is impossible. Now, the difference between archaic Ionian and later Ionians, because it is very important to understand the difference between these two. That is simple. This letter, actually, this letter Ionian is the only one addition to the later Ionian, because there were 23 characters in the Ionian script. Another letter was added, that, and only the later Ion used, instead of Z letter, they used only X in the Roman character. So this is the minor difference between the archaic Ionian and later. So we have to differentiate between these two, the way these scripts used in Bactria and Gandhara region by the Indo-Greek. Thereafter, based on the Phoenician and the Ionian script, Aramaic and Pahlavi script evolved in the just outskirts, are very close to the Indian borders, western borders. The Aramaic script and the Achaemenid Empire, during the Achaemenid Empire, this Aramaic was in vogue, and as well as the Pahlavi script evolved later based on the Aramaic. Now, the difference between old Bactrian and later Bactrian, because the modern historians, they date Shaka at least before the Kanishka. Modern historians date Kanishka around in the 2nd century BC, but Chestana and Nahapana lived in the 1st century AD. This is a great chronological inconsistency. I am just pointing out, you can see visually the coins. The coins used by Nahapana and Chestana, the script is well evolved. The Bactrian script was well evolved. If you see the script used by the Kanishka and the Vim codifices, the script is not so perfect. It is still evolving. It is the old Bactrian, where the Nahapana Chestana used a later Bactrian. So that's why, as per my chronology, Kanishka was somewhere in the 12th century, Vim codifices and Kanishka were in the 12th century BC, where the Nahapana and Chestana were in the 6th century, or just beginning of the 6th century BC. So there was at least a 500 to 600 years gap between these two. But modern historians date Chestana, Nahapana at least 100 years or 50 years before Kanishka. Then this is the totally, the paleography, they are completely violating the paleography, the basics of paleography. But since their distorted chronology has no other option, so they just evade or they just ignore this inconsistency. So based on this, I made this chronological order as per the traditional chronology for Indian chronological studies. The Brahmi Kharoshthi, then we have to take Phoenician, Aramaic, then Old Bactrian, Aramaic, and now these are the famous inscriptions of the king Piyodasas. The mention is Piyodasas. So what they have identified Piyodasas as the Priyadarshi. Okay. So now the Priyadarshi is well known as an Ashoka. So they said that these are the inscriptions having Piyodasas, and Aramaic only introduced in the during the time of Achaemenids, and Achaemenids lived 550 as per the modern chronology. This is the reason you can never date Ashoka beyond Achaemenid chronology. Because Aramaic, if Ashoka is using an Aramaic script, you cannot date. There are two, there is the Kandhar Greek and there is the one inscription, it is bilingual Greek and Aramaic. This is another inscription, Lampaka is a place, and these are the 6 places what I am showing to you. Kandhar, Lagman, Lampaka, Shabadgadi, Rani Ghat, and Manshera, and Takshila. These are the places where these inscriptions have been found. So, what I have explained to you very clearly, Aramaic evolved at least 400 years after the Ashoka. So that's why these inscriptions are nothing to do with the Ashoka. And all Indian inscriptions of Ashoka refer to Devanam Priyadarshi. Devanam Priyadarshi. And there is no reference of Devanam at all in those things, only Piyodasas. And the script, whatever the text provided, does not match with the other rock edicts at all. And moreover, Indian kings never ever released any inscription in the some foreign languages. They always issued all decrees or the orders in Sanskrit or Prakrit languages only. They cannot use the Greek language and Aramaic. It is actually Indo-Greek kings who may have adopted a Sanskrit name as Priyadarshi. He was the author of the inscriptions of Greek and Aramaic inscriptions. Because the way the Sujidhvaja, Meenaraja, and Milinda, from the Meenander Milinda, similarly, somebody has, some Indo-Greek king may have taken a name of Priyadarshi, called in Piyodasas, in Prakrit Piyodasa, and probably in a Greek language, the Piyodasas word has been used in those inscriptions. So the Indo-Greek, an Indo-Greek king really was the author of these Greek and Aramaic inscriptions, not Ashoka. So when we arrive the chronology, actually the Hercules, he invaded up to Gandhara, and some Ionians migrated as per the chronology around 1890 to 1700 BC, and an Indo-Greek kings and his governors were there in the western border. This was the reason why Ashoka was referring to some Indo-Greek kings. So Indo-Greek kings were already there in Gandhara or in Bactria before the invasion of Alexander. So this is totally incorrect. The way the modern historians think that all Indo-Greek kings came only after the invasion of Alexander. It is totally untrue, because Arin in his book Anabasis of Alexander, he clearly mentions that already the Greek temples and Greek settlements existed in Bactria and Gandhara when Alexander came to Gandhara. So already Greek settlements existed in so the Ashoka, who is referring to the Indo-Greek kings, they have to be dated before Alexander. And Indo-Greek kings, and this is the dating I have done tentatively based on at least we found so many coins, and they indicate more than 30-40 Indo-Greek kings ruled over. So their chronology was pretty long, at least 400-500 years. They reigned over the Bactria and the Gandhar. So this is the chronology up to this is how we can date perfectly the Milinda, 1365 to 1340, exactly 500 years after Menander, and almost at the same time the Heliodorus, he visited Vidisha during the time of Shunga dynasty, and Shunga dynasty was reigning over at that time. This is how we can reconcile the chronology of Indo-Greek kings and the Kushanas, because there is no reference of Indo-Greek kings and Kushanas in Puranas, though there are references that some Yavana kings ruled over for a particular time period, but not in the chronology. The Puranic historians never mention. Now we can easily reconcile this. And when Indo-Greek lost kingdom, then Kujula Kadaphishes, the Kushana king, he became the successors, and he actually, since Bactria were under colonial rule of Indo-Greek king for 400, 500 years, they adopted a one particular script, same Greek script, which became Bactrian script because Bactrians were using Bactrian language. So they started writing Bactrian language using the Indo-Greek script. So that's why there is a difference between the Bactrian script and the Greek script. And this is the chronology of Kushanas, Kujula Kadaphishes, then Sattrakshana, Vim Kadaphishes, Kanishka was in the 2nd century, 12th century BC. This is the 1300 years gap, what I am saying in the Buddhist chronology, because Buddha Nirvana has been dated in 483 BC. There is an error of 1380 years. The same problem, the chronological problem in dating of Kushanas. So then, based on it, and considering the 660-year chronology, the Seleucid era and Yavana era, actually both are identical. Our Indians refer to Seleucid era as Yavana era, 972, but modern historian date 312 as the Seleucid era. That is incorrect. So the Yavana era used by Indians, and there are numerous inscriptions refer to Yavana era. So we have to date Yavana era considering the 972 BC. Sorry, I'm referring to 972 CE. It's not CE, it's BC. Then Scythian king Azes, it is 844 BC. So there is a difference of 122 years between. This is because there's Indo-Greeks. Thereafter, we have the Kushana kings. Then the Scythian kings were the successors of the Kushanas. And King Azes were a very powerful Scythian king in the west. So he introduced his era called Azes era around 844 BC. There was almost, I can say, 128 years difference between Seleucid era and the Azes era. So we can perfectly establish the epochs of these two epochs. Now, this is our Indian traditional chronology, which perfectly we can reconcile with reference to the dating of Indo-Greek kings, Kushanas, and the Scythians in the west. So, this is how we need to explain the dating of the Indo-Greeks, Kushanas, and Scythians with reference to Puranic chronology. Aditya, I'll just stop here because now my main objective was here to explain the chronological inconsistency when we follow the Puranic chronology, but we completely miss out the Indo-Greeks, Scythians, and Kushanas because unfortunately the chronology of these kings is not given in Puranas because Puranas always focused on only the chronology of those Indian Kshatriya kings. Their focus was on that way. So that's why they simply skipped the era of the kingless period. At that time, nothing was great to mention about it, so they skipped it. But now, once we reconcile with these or all the various numismatic studies and the Indo-Greek references in Indian literature, then everything becomes very perfect. And the best thing, what from my study, what I want to again repeat it, that Aramaic script evolved much later. So the Aramaic inscriptions cannot be identified with the Ashoka at all. The king mentioned Theodosius was an Indo-Greek king. He was not in Ashoka.
No, you need to be somebody to be mentioned in Purana. I mean, our rishis, they follow a particular standard. So if you are a Yavana, or if you are a person who is going to cause atrocities on other people, then the good history is being written. See, nowadays all history is being written. Even glorification of Aurangzeb is there, which is in the books till date. I got a copy yesterday of one of the books. It still refers to golden period of Mughal Ithihas. No, no, no. It's NCRT.
Okay. Yeah. They are
It's
the
NCRT, CBSE syllabus, CBSE.
Yeah,
And
our Nehru and onwards, they became very big fans of Mughal kings, I think.
yeah, and they need to know that their descendants, like Pakistan and Bangladesh, how they're suffering. They need to know that. And also,
recently I visited the Leh. There was a king he was actually wanted a help because Tibetans were forcing him to surrender to him. So he asked a help from Aurangzeb. That time he was a contempt. So Aurangzeb insisted that you have to build a mosque there and become a Muslim, then only I'll send you the help.
That's
This is
exactly it
how the
works.
first mosque was built in Leh.
Correct. That's how it is. It works. That's how it works. The only thing is like we do not, as Hindus, we do not value our culture enough, and we always try to come up with situations where we glorify the other party too much without understanding what they actually mean. So Atiti Devo Bhava is only for people who are not enemies. It's not
And
for anyone else.
yeah, it is not just Atithi. You can't ask the Atithi to come and rule over in your house.
Yeah,
Atithi has to go back. He has, he may not have the Tithi when come, but he has a Tithi when he goes on
goes,
vacation.
yes. And also Atiti has to be qualified one. So Atiti Devo Bhava is used only for the sadhu,
Yes.
not for the other, because only sadhu will come uninvited because he is wandering. Sannyasi is wandering. So he can come anytime you want.
Your oppressor and invader cannot become Atithi to you.
He is a
You have to
Shatru. He
have.
is a Shatru. He is a Shatru. And the
And
Shatru
it
has.
is visible now, the Gyanvapi we have seen, the way they desecrated Indian eye. And that is well written in Masire Alamgir.
Yes.
And it is even written, even that the Sri Krishna temple in Mathura, they have not only broken those idols, and he brought those things and in the steps of that Jahan Ara Masjid, he actually deposited all those things so that every day the people may be walking over those steps. So they want to the way they insult the Indian public. The, this was the main idea behind the Aurangzeb's the
See
kind
the
of oppression he actually
See,
exercised.
the thing is like, unless Hindus protect their culture with the same vigor as the invaders did their culture, it is not going to happen. The correctness won't happen because we need to protect our culture because Hindus is what the world is looking for, not for any other culture. Every other culture has created violence. Like when I talk to an American, they are impressed by me being a Hindu American, not by not being an Indian American, because Indian American means nothing. Indian
Yeah,
American, there are many Indian American name organizations who actually work against India. But when you say you are a Hindu and you are an American, that means you are credible because you are an original follower. You know, like the
yeah, that's true. Indian does not mean that you just somewhere a few generation back somebody born in India. That's why you are an Indian. No, you are an Indian because you follow the Sanatana Dharma. That's why you are
exactly.
a Hindu. Otherwise, what is your identity in the just in India?
That's right. That's right.
The bedrock of the India is the Hindutva.
I think the in the this is the 3 day celebration is going on. This is also the time to learn our history and our own culture so that we can represent more properly. And also we have to be firm, like in terms of the Jahangir mosque we mentioned. It should be banned over there, that nobody should be going there because you're stepping on the Krishna's. So that is also a barrier also. People should
No,
not
we
be.
have named these are all celebration Amrit Mahotsava. That does not mean that you have just completed 75 years. It is just completion of 78, 75 years does not make a country as an immortal or Amrita. That will become when you establish your strong foundations again. You have to lay a strong foundation for the nation in which the history is the bedrock because a civilization survives its legacy, the heritage. That has to be brought in. Actually, we have to teach our entire generation to learn about our history and our heritage so that the young generation will have that kind of a pride and they will work very hard to bring this nation even as a forefront of the entire world. Otherwise, you will be simply following the world leaders. If you
Exactly.
don't, it's a civilization state. And in a way, it's a cradle of civilization. I can say the cradle of world civilization. So you are actually sleeping. It means we need to be awakened about our the identity of our heritage and our legacy.
When somebody told Prabhupada, the ISKCON founder, he said, according to our Western civilization, and Prabhupada is in New York, he immediately replied to him. He said, where is the Western civilization? He said, you drink the milk of cows and you kill them. What is civilization? So civilization is built on compassion and moral values, not built based on terrorism. So this was a very good answer. I found it very instructive. Where is the Western civilization?
Hey,
So
that's
thank
very well answered by the Swamiji. This actually should be asked with the so-called Islamic culture and civilization, the way they talk about.
yeah. I mean Islamic culture civilization, where is that in 57 Islamic countries? They're so insecure they can't allow a Hindu temple.
No, generally I'll see in the media debates in the TV news channel, somebody comes and sitting and the tagline is that Islamic scholar. What is the scholarship in that one they are actually claiming about?
They're Islamic scholar in
You
fanaticism.
have to have a value-based philosophy, a religion, then you will be a scholar. If everything is to some way to kill others, to survive, your survival is only based on killing others, then you don't need any scholarship.
Well, that is called Asura in 16th chapter of Gita. So, they should say Asuric scholar, and then everything is normal, not well. So, thank you so much. And the word Asuric and Ahura is same, Asura and Ahura, because the pronunciation of S was not there. So, when you say Ahura Mazda, is actually Asura, Asura Niti. So, thank you so much. Anyway, namaste and thank you, Vedveer. Always a pleasure to have you. And always,
Thank you.
please do like, subscribe, and share the videos because our ranking is getting affected on YouTube. Thank you and namaste.